weird happens. 1 week.
Something weird. Something weird.
Yeah, okay, we're live now, so that's going to be part of the recording.
Okay, great.
The thing is, I'm afraid if I make any more adjustments, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, I sent the message that we are live. I'm going to move Slack out of the way. Oh, I should open up the Twitch app like you. Do you still have it up?
I do. I'm waiting for it to show up.
Okay.
Is this it?
Oh, it opened up for me.
I never get it the first time. Oh, there we go. Sweet. Oh, no, that's me. One new video.
I'm live now. It says we've been live for about a minute now. I don't have any viewers, but I pasted something in the chat. Oh, looks like we've got one student. Do you see the reply? Oh, we got 2 students already. Look at that. Excellent. Sorry. We were trying to get Anthony into the right part of Twitch. And as a warning, it sounds like we're going to have some audio issues tonight. I'm going to have more of a stutter than I normally do. And there might be times where I can't hear Anthony, which is going to make things even more fun.
Oh, there
Get
it
it
is.
up, Anthony.
It did. It finally is.
Oh, it
there.
Just cut out again.
Okay, I got it. I got an ad.
File Fed and State for $0. Get the free.
This is awesome. What is going on with this audio?
Here. Okay, I got it. I got an ad.
File Fed and State for $0. Get the free
Who else is here? Me. All right, I'm here. Sweet.
They're so old. I don't have anything else.
I'll turn the audio off there. Okay.
Can you hear me right now, Anthony?
Absolutely. You sound.
Okay. I'm going to proceed as though everything is great, even though right now I can't hear a single word you say. Sound cool?
That's how I deal with life.
I think that was a joke. I'm laughing as if it was a joke. We're going to try this out. So the main goal tonight is to talk about box model. Now, I think we might have talked a little bit about this in the Web Inspector lecture, but tonight we're going to dig into it because with just a few new properties, you will be able to start making some cool things, particularly nav bars. Every website has a nav bar. What I'd like to do is actually live code one for you. Someone is saying it's choppy.
It's like conky, right?
And I can't hear a thing you're saying, Anthony.
It sounds just like conky. Pee Wee Herman. Look it up. YouTube it. It's okay. What I'm saying. Dang. What I'm saying is not important. It's fine.
Just a second. All right, now I should be able to hear you.
Test 1, 2.
Sweet. I can hear you, but I'm afraid there's going to be an echo on the live stream. Can you speak a little bit more?
Test 1, 2. You sound like Conky from Pee Wee Herman. Look it up, YouTube.
I finally got the reference now.
Okay.
Sweet. That's so sad that it took that long. Okay, I think we're good now.
Am I right? He sounds just like Conky. Am I right? You don't watch Pee Wee's Playhouse? Ever? Who doesn't watch that? Huh. Who knew? My wife doesn't watch that.
You know what? I'm just going to blame Skype. It's got to be Skype, right? Except they're hearing it too, so maybe it's not Skype.
I just hope it shows up in the recording. It's so awesome.
It does. I watched the recording last time and I saw some of this. Not the color live
Dude,
stream. That was with a
this is
different
what you
computer.
just
I
said.
think it might be this computer.
I'm going to imitate you right now. I saw it. It's great. You got to do that live.
I'm sorry, everyone. Okay, so let's talk about the box model. I'm gonna bring up the code on the screen. We're just gonna go straight into it.
Oh, we can hear Anthony fine, not Brandon. How about you just move your lips?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I've pulled up my outline for tonight. Here's everything we're gonna talk about. Remember last week during the color live stream, which thank you for everyone who was able to attend and watch that. We talked about how you could write color and background color CSS properties. This week, I'm going to focus on introducing primarily three new CSS properties: the border, the margin, and the padding properties. And there's a lot of ways that you can write those that we'll go over tonight. I have a fun grab bag of topics as well. Fun things like the border radius property, how you can rewrite some of your margin, padding, and border statements in a different order. Oh man, it must be doing it again. I can tell Anthony's reactions. The box shadow property, which I've not used a lot, but I know that some students like playing around with it. Outlines, which I actually did not know much about before I read our textbook chapter. And then display types are going to be a key ingredient to making our nav bar look right. So let me skip over here. I've got an HTML file that I have saved. It's called nav.html. There's nothing in it. I'm going to use Atom to autofill most of the things that we need. I type HTML and I hit tab, and it brings me everything that I need. I'm going to call this page navbar experiment. And I'm going to put an H1 in here that says navbar experiment as well. And if I save that, let me go open it up in Chrome so everyone can see it. Well, you know what? I meant to open that in a new tab. Sorry about that, everyone. Once you have everything situated, this is my web design mode. I'll have the browser up. I'll have the Atom or whatever text editor I'm using open up in another window, and I'll swap back and forth. The key commands that I'm using that are pretty helpful here are Command S on a PC. That's Control S. Command Tab to switch windows. And when you have just two applications that you're working with, you can actually hit Command Tab back and forth really quickly. When I'm in the browser, after I have saved and I switch back here, I can hit Command R to refresh it. And remember, our primary goal tonight is to build a nav bar. So the tag that's most relevant to that is actually called nav. I think we talked about this earlier in the semester when they were trying to figure out what tags to add HTML5. They looked at what most websites had in terms of elements on their web page, and they saw that a lot of people were naming a section of their web page nav, and so that became a nav tag that we can use. So I've opened and I've closed the nav tag. What am I going to put in here? Well, a nav bar typically is just a list of links. It might be the links to parts of your website or parts of your page. We're going to make a very simple nav bar today with just 3 things in it. And I said the keyword list. The most common list that you'll see used is an unordered list, because it doesn't really matter the order of my links in the nav bar. If you look at any nav bar, it's almost guaranteed to have an unordered list inside of it. So I'm going to open up the UL and close the UL. And then I'm going to put 3 list items in here. So that's 3 LIs. And let's link to a couple websites. I'll pick Apple, I'll pick Google, and Mid-Michigan College. Why not? So if I save that and I go back and I refresh, the links aren't clickable. Let me zoom this out a little bit. But I do have 3 list items. How do I turn them into links? Anthony, what tag can I use to make actual links?
Well, we've talked about the anchor tag is
bingo. The link tag itself is more aligned with referencing CSS files.
Anchor tag?
Yeah, anchor tag is the one that we want to use, not instead of link tag. Thank you for saying that. So anchor tag, Oh, my display went away. Hold on just a second. Come on, computer. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to put Apple inside of the first anchor tag here. And that one property, the href property, is where we actually put the URL that we're trying to link to. That would be https://apple.com. Google, I'm going to put an anchor tag in here too. That's https google.com. And everyone hopefully has the Mid-Michigan College website memorized. midmich.edu. So I've got 3 links made inside of an unordered list. So the only tags that I've used so far are nav, ul, li, and the anchor tag, the a tag. If I go refresh this, let me get rid of that extra word. We've got 3 links that can go in a nav bar. Now, they're blue. They've got bullet points to them. It's not really the most pretty nav bar. So let's take a look at what CSS we can write to actually change this design. We've got the HTML structure perfect. I like starting out at this point. I'm going to go over to another tab that I have open called styles.css. And just to show that everything, I'm going to change the body background color. No, yeah, let's change the nav background color. So that's background-color to gray. And when I save that and go back, you'll see my website didn't change because I have a style sheet, styles.css, but I forgot to put it in our HTML document. That's where we need that link tag that I was confusing a minute ago. So the link tag, if I tab complete that from Adam, takes one important property as well, the href property or attribute, and I want to change that to be the name of my style sheet, which is styles.css. Hopefully you can see on the left-hand side here that I've got the nav file and the styles.css file in the same folder. So with any luck, when I go back to Chrome and I refresh, I've got a background color on my nav bar. So all right, let's go back, and now we can write some real CSS. If we take a look at my outline of things that we wanted to talk about, we've got borders, we've got margin, we've got padding. Well, let's start with a border. Let's put a border around the nav bar itself. So in this nav selector that I wrote, this nav element selector, I can actually add a border. And if you have border autocomplete, look in the book or our CSS property database. We had a couple of people show you how you can write the border. It's actually a shortcut for 3 separate properties. I think it's like border width or border size, the border style, and then the border color. I'm going to write that as 1 pixel solid blue. And you know what? 1 was probably too small to see, so I'm going to make that 5 pixels. So we've got a blue border on the nav bar. You don't have to choose dash or solid. You can choose a bunch of other styles like dashed or dotted. I think you get to play around with a few different types of border in the chapter exercises. Let's put that back to blue. So we've taken one of the properties and we've implemented it in the box model. What's a good candidate? What do you want to do next, Anthony? Do you want to take a look at margin or padding?
Well, let's work our way out.
All right. So after you want to start on the inside and go to the outside? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So on the inside of the box model, you actually start with padding. Between text content and the border itself is a region that you can control. That's called padding. So if I want to control the padding on this nav bar, I can type the padding property, and I'll put 5 pixels in here. See that what that does is it puts more space between the bulleted list and the border. If we take a look at margin instead, you'll see that when I refresh, it actually puts more space on the outside of the border between the page. But really, none of these are changing our nav bar too dramatically. Let's write a different selector. I'm going to remove the padding and the margin from the nav. And let's write a different selector that targets something that's inside the nav bar. Let's take a look at that UL itself. The UL, the unordered list, the first thing that I want to do is I want to get rid of these bullet points because I don't want them showing up in my nav bar. the UL or the LIs actually have a property on them called list style dash type. And when you auto-complete, one of the options is none. So by default, I think it's like bullet point, or let me see what the options are here. Like alphanumeric or numbered. If you change it to none, it actually gets rid of the bullet points. But it doesn't get rid of the space that's along the left-hand side. So this is something that whenever I'm making a new nav bar, I get confused with. But there is a property, either margin or padding, that you can put on the UL to get rid of this left-hand padding that we see here. So I'm going to hit refresh. That margin removed from the top and bottom. It didn't get rid of what was on the left. So let's add padding back into the mix. Get rid of padding. We'll set that to 0. And there we go. Now we've got a nav bar where there's no space between the list items and the outside edges. So if we're working from our inside out, we've removed all of that padding there. Let's think about how we want to actually line things up a little bit in a nav bar. The Mid-Michigan College nav bar actually puts things side by side, and I think that's what a lot of you might want to do for your nav bar as well. It's another CSS property that I'd like to play around with called display. And we have to control display not on either the nav or the UL. We have to take a look at what's inside here, inside of our HTML, inside of this unordered list. So we have these LIs and we have the anchor tags. We're going to play around with margin and padding and border and the display property on these elements here. So we're going to probably have to adjust both of them. Let's start with LI. Let's change the LI's display. By default, I think that's set to like list item. If you look in the web inspector, let me pull up the web inspector here. And I'm going to inspect. Just one of the first LIs here. If I can zoom this up so we can see it in the web inspector. The default on an LI says that the display should be list item. That's what allows things to stack on top of each other. We want to change. We want that to not be a list item anymore. Let's say we wanted them to be unique. Sorry, to be left to right stacked next to each other. We could change that display mode to inline is one of the values for display that I think we're already used to. This is like what happens when you put links inside of a paragraph, or if you put an image inside of a paragraph, things are displayed inline. So that allowed them to stack one after another. There's a variation. There's like two ends of the spectrum here. There's display inline and display block. Block is great if you wanted to stack up on top of each other. Where did Chrome go? So if I change that to block and I refresh, it actually put the one on top of each other again. A lot like list item, but in reality what it's saying is that each one of these links takes up the whole width from left all the way to right. And the next one then, which is display block, has to start on its own line below. When the browser makers and the standards makers were talking about this, they realized that what if there was a way to have something that was both inline, so it appeared left to right stacked next to each other, but also block in that we can set all of the box model properties on it, including the padding and the margin on the top and bottom. They created a hybrid value for display. It's inline dash block, and so that should autocomplete. So this is a way that you can get the best of both worlds. And if I refresh the page now, you'll see that they do display left to right next to each other, but we get the power of being able to actually specify padding on the top and bottom. So let me set padding top just to show you something here of 10 pixels. Notice how the padding appeared above each of the list items that we had been looking at. That's good. If I had changed this back to inline and I refresh, that padding goes away, because when something's inline, it doesn't have the benefit of being able to have its height set or its top and bottom heading and margin set. So the hardest part of this nav bar is actually to change the default behavior of these HTML elements to behave the way that we want. So we're going to change the li to inline block. And then we're going to add some padding around each of these list items. So now this is probably looking already more like a real nav bar to you. Let me scoot the web inspector out of the way. We have Apple, we have Google, and we have Mid-Michigan College lined up to right. If I move my mouse above or below the link text, though, you'll see that the cursor that is like a pointer changes back to the arrow, so it's not clickable. So the biggest trick that I know of with nav bars is actually that you don't want the list items to be what has the thing that you hover over. You typically want the anchor tags to have that padding. So how can I show this to you in a way that it'll make more sense? Well, let me add a pseudo selector li. Let's say that the li, when you hover over it, has a different background color. I'm going to set that to red. If I come over here and I refresh, oh, you know what? I didn't mean to put that on the li. I'm sorry, I'm distracted tonight. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's write a pseudo selector that changes the color of our links. So a lot of you will write an anchor tag selector where you might change the color not the blue but to some other color like let's say purple. And then the next thing that you might do is say, hey, when you have hovered over a link, so a:hover, let's change that text color to a different color. So I'm going to make it green. So if I hover over the text, it changes the color. But if I put cursor underneath the link, it doesn't change the color. And this is probably even more evident if it's not tied to color, but it's tied to background color. So let's say that the links have a background color of gray, and then when you hover over them, they have a background color of black. Let's see how that works. So when I change the background color of the links, you'll see that the only place that background color shows up is directly behind the text. And if you go to any nav bar, we'll go to the Mid-Michigan College one, it's much more common that you want to make this like button shape that when you hover over it, the space immediately around the link changes color too. So if I hover over each one of these, that dark blue extends more than just around the word academics, it's around that entire region that academics is clickable. So the real trick to that is to not put the padding around this list item, but to take that padding, and I'm just going to cut it, and instead put that on the anchor tag. Now, unfortunately, that anchor tag padding doesn't work by default because the link that we talked about has a default display property of inline. So we have to also bring over this display inline block. Oh, there we go. Back color. Something's not right in my demonstration already. I went off script. The padding on my links is not. Now it looks like the button is exploding when I hover over it. Let me zoom out a little bit. Wonder if I'm supposed to have padding around that as well. There we go. So I meant to leave the padding on the nav bar itself. This is what I wanted the nav bar to look like. So we've got 3 links in an ordered list. Properties that we've adjusted so far in the box model do include border around the nav, but you could have just as easily taken a border and added it around the anchor tags. So if we wanted to, we could put a quick border, one pick solid white around the hyperlinks here, and you'll see that now they appear with a border on them as well. Each of these properties can be adjusted on hover with the pseudo selector, :hover. And they can each have a margin as well. So if you wanted to have a margin on the outside of the anchor tags, I'm going to add one. And this is going to actually add space between each of them. It's kind of hard to see unless I change the background color of the anchor tag to something other than gray. I'm going to make it blue temporarily. So you see now that this margin on the left and right actually affects where the next one starts. So this is one variation of a nav bar that you could build. They don't have to be horizontal like this. If I had chosen not to use inline block, I could have just as easily chosen block. So wherever I had display inline block, I'm going to quick change that to block. And then they appear on top of each other in a really weird way. Why did that happen? List style type none. Is this not a block? So 3 list items. I'm going to put that on the LI. Oh, that's probably why it's not working. I don't have an LI in here. Display block. Okay, I thought I must have had a typo in here. I must have only had the UL. I don't think I ever wrote the LI selector. My apologies for that. So now if I change this back to inline block on both of these, does it get rid of... Well, it got rid of part of it. It doesn't have the padding on my anchor tag now. Something really weird is going on with this. Do I have a different typo that I'm not seeing? Okay, and then if I change that to block, okay. But why is there no... Oh, I was missing a semicolon. There we go. Look at that. A semicolon.
Where was that?
Color. So how could I have found that missing semicolon without all of the trial and error? I could have copied my CSS and paste it into a validator. That would have helped me. The other thing that I probably could have done is if I open up the web inspector when it's broken like this, if my computer would not lock up when I open up the web inspector. What I wanted to show you here, if I can zoom this a little bigger in the web inspector, is right here is the CSS that I wrote selecting the A. You'll see that it says background-color, and then it says gray padding, :10 pixels, and it has this line through it. If I hover over the exclamation mark here, it says this is invalid property value. So I missed the semicolon after the word gray here. And so it thought that I was trying to change the background color to something named gray padding 10. And that is not, I mean, it sounds like Paddington the Bear, but that is not the name of a color. So that is another way that I could have found that typo and saved myself the hassle here on the live stream of thinking that I was going crazy. So let's go back to Adam. And I'm going to simplify some of what's going on here just so we can get it all on one screen again. We do need padding and margin on the UL set to 0. The LI, we wanted that to be a display inline block. We wanted the anchor tag to be an inline block. Get rid of the background color there. And I'm going to leave just padding on the anchor tag. And refresh that. Okay, this is a simpler nav bar. When I hover over each link, the background around changes as well, which is nice. But I still have a little extra padding on here above the black. I think that's coming from either the UL or the nav. So let's take a look. Yep, I had added 10 pixels to the nav, thinking that I was missing something there. I'm going to get rid of that. This is pretty close to the nav bar that we have at the college, with the exception that we probably don't actually have a border around it. So I'm going to get rid of that. Now we've got this gray bar, and when I hover over it, each link turns black. So that's one variation on the nav bar. Remember, you have any other CSS properties you can use. I didn't even do anything to control the underlines here. In most nav bars, I see people remove the underline on hyperlinks because people kind of know what a nav bar looks like. They don't need the underline. So if you wanted to get rid of that underline, you could do that on the anchor tag selector. That's text decoration none. So that's looking more nav bar as well. And when I was trying to show you variations on that, I wanted to show you that you didn't have to use inline block. If you actually use the real block value, then you actually get a nav bar where things are stacked one on top of another. And if you then added a width property on either the nav bar or any of these things, if I just set a width of 200 pixels, then I've got a nav bar where the links stack on top of each other. And you've probably seen this on web pages as well, where you've got the left-hand nav bar design for you. So with just a little bit of CSS, we have turned a very dull list of links into both a horizontal and a vertical nav bar. What I would out in here that's relevant to what you've been working on in your journal and in your assignment are what the different selectors are that we've used. We've used the nav selector as an element selector because we're specifically asking the browser to style any nav tag that it comes in. We've also used a pseudo selector. First we're setting a color and some properties on the anchor tag, but then we're asking when the anchor is in a state of being hovered, we want to change the background color to black. This is a pseudo selector that changes the anchor tags, all the anchor tags, just when you hover over them. And there's a couple other states that a link can be in. It could be visited. It could be active when you're actually clicking on the link. Those are the most common pseudo selectors that I'm familiar with. When you use a pseudo selector, if you aren't going to change anything that the anchor tag already has described, like you don't want to change the text color, you don't want to change the padding, you can leave all those just in the general anchor tag selector. The only thing that I usually change in my hover selector are like the background color, because that's what I want to change when I go over it. You can actually change any property on hover, so you could do something really crazy like change the font size to like 20 pixels. Now when I hover over this, you'll see that the text gets bigger as I hover over each link. Some people like this type of effect. I personally am not a big fan because you'll notice that the actual size of the nav bar changes as the text gets larger and it wraps to some of the words into new lines. So that makes the page jump up and down as you hover over or something. But I just wanted to show you that you could change any of those properties on hover. So there were a couple properties that I haven't had a chance to show off yet. I want to at least talk about them. We did talk about borders, margin, and padding. Border radius, let's bring that up. If I go over to styles, I'm going to get rid of the background color on the nav bar. I'm just going to comment that out. So if I go back to my web page, you'll see that the only color, and I'm going to make this be an inline block. We're going to go back to horizontal on both of these. And we'll get rid of the width too. We don't need to set that. So now I've got 3 links side by side. There's no background color in the nav, so I just see the color behind the links. If I didn't want these square borders, I can actually use border radius as a property. Whether I have a border set or not, border radius actually changes the outside shape. So if I enter a border radius of something like 5 pixels and I reach that, you'll see that these become little capsules or rounded buttons, which you see all over the place online. the amount of border radius is always fun to play with. You can crank that up to something ridiculous like 100%, and they become these little semicircle shapes or these little ellipsi. Or if you just say, at some point, if you go so high up, it becomes just a circle, essentially, is what it changes the element into. So I like
it's ellipsi. You sure it's not ellipses?
I don't know. You could ask Siri.
Just checking.
I don't know. I'm taking a leap of faith that it's ellipsi. I like 5 pixels or 10 pixels. I think that's what you'll find on the mid website. So border radius is really fun. Border, margin, padding, even border radius. You can actually control all sides of this. So there's actually a separate property for margin top and padding top compared to the rest. And when you set something like padding or margin with just that word, you're actually setting all four sides at once. But you don't have to. So if I wanted 10 pixels on each side, I could have actually written that as padding left 10 pixels, padding right 10 pixels, padding dash top 10 pixels, and padding bottom 10 pixels. And that's actually the exact same as just saying padding 10 pixels. Now, where this is more fun is if you actually wanted to change these and say, I actually want more padding on the left, and I want 0 padding on the right, and 0 padding on the top, you can make a really fun shape button or nav bar. You can make all sorts of tiles that have the text pinned to a different location. You can control those separately, but it gets really hard to write them all because you have 4 separate rules that you've written here. There's a different way to write that, and the textbook actually tries to give you a easy way to remember that with the word trouble as a learning device. The way that the order goes is you can actually say padding colon, and then you can specify 4 values. You can give the top value, so let's say that was 0, and then it goes trouble, so top right, it's going clockwise. You see it as that way. So the right, I think I had done something like 200 pixels, and then the bottom, we'll say 10 pixels, and then finally left.
How do you know to use pixels instead of percentages or some of the other various unit measurements that you have available to you?
That's a really good question. I think I switched to percentage there when I was looking at the radius because I knew that's how you could get to a circle really easily. Generally speaking, you can use pixels or ems or a couple other units interchangeably, and the ones that are percentage or em based, they're kind of like they're kind of a relative unit to the size of what you're looking at. So when you wanted something to be a percent of the width, that's when you would use the percent unit. If you want to set the width of something to 50%, it would be 50% of its parent. It's a lot easier when you're trying to lay out parts of the page to sometimes use percentages because that would scale whether you're on a small screen or a bigger screen. But if you know that you just want it to be one size and to never change, that's when it's safe to use the pixel unit of measurement. Some of the other ones that you're going to see commonly are the EM unit, and that comes from the width of the letter M at the current font size. That unit is fun to work with. So I know that is pretty common for, like, on our website we'll say the padding is, instead of 10 pixels, we'll do like padding of 1 EM unit, and that's automatically, if you look here, the padding here is now the width of the letter M all around, which is pretty fun. But that means that if you change your text size, then you get more padding on the left and right and top and bottom, which is fun. So I hope that kind of answers the question. For border and margin and padding, I would say you're probably going to use units like pixels rather than percentages. Okay, so we had just talked about we could write left, top, right, bottom as something shorter by using that treble mnemonic. So top, I think I wanted to be 0 pixels, or 0. Right, we wanted it to be 0. bottom, we'll say 100 pixels, and then left 100 pixels. So what's that padding looks like? Yeah, that made a really funny shape, but you can see that Apple's now on the top of the button in Google and Mid-Michigan College. You can make a pretty cool design using padding. Now, personally, as a developer who works on a team, I very easily forget the order. Sometimes I forget that it's clockwise that the flow is supposed to be entered into. So I personally prefer writing it more verbosely as padding dash left, dash right, dash top, dash bottom. But I do know many other people that really like writing it shorter. But that is all a matter of preference. So let me go back to the plain 10 pixels. Box shadows are really fun. That I'm not going to cover in the live stream because we're already going longer than I expected. But box shadows are a way to put like a drop shadow behind a box, or you can actually specify more than one box shadow at once. So you could actually have when you hover over something, you can have a shadow appear underneath of it somewhere really far away on the page, which is a really cool effect. So I encourage you to look up how to specify box shadows. For the research, if you literally search for this box shadow, the Mozilla Developer Network page is a great resource. The first one that comes up is the W3 Schools, but the second one is the Mozilla Developer Network. And what I like about this page is they give you like 3 or 4 examples, and when you hover over each one, it shows you a real-life example of the code in action. So like, here's their demo. On the right-hand side is a preview, and as you move your mouse over and you click on each one, they'll show you a different type of box shadow at play. And this the fifth example shows a green drop shadow and a red shadow applied to a box. And you can probably imagine what you could do in a nav bar with some of these effects. Maybe not there until you hover over it, but it's still cool to think about adding a box shadow that way. Outlines. When I used to give this lecture, I would add the borders to try to see where things were. Like I would add a border around all the A's, or I'd add around a border around all of the LI's. And they'd be different color borders, and I'd be able to see where one ended and the other thing began. But there's a problem with using borders. They actually affect the width of the element that you're styling. So if you actually were specifying widths, things would start getting slightly bigger than you expected. And I didn't know this until I read our book, but there's the outline property, which behaves just like a border, except it does not ever affect the actual width of the element that you're looking at. So as an example, anywhere where I had a border property specified, and I don't have any right now, let's add a border on the anchor tags. I'm going to add we'll start with a border that's like 2 pixels red and is solid. Notice how everything got wider when I refreshed here. And if I cranked that up to something ridiculous like 10 pixels, everything got even wider still. I'm going to put that down to 2 pixels. If I change border to be outline, you'll see that there is still a border around it, but the width of the items did not change. So if I did something crazy like crank that up to 10 pixels of an outline again, the outlines actually appear all on top of each other. They like bleed over top, which is a cool effect, but it's also great when you're trying to troubleshoot why something isn't working the way that you want. You want to put some lines on the page. I love the outline property now that I know about it. And then we talked about display types. So I think that those are most of the properties that I wanted to show you in action. I am going to take this code and I'll upload it to the spot where we host the live stream recording so that you can download it and play with it. But now you have an example of a nav bar that you can tweak for your own liking. What do you prefer on a website, Anthony? Do you prefer horizontal navs or vertical navs? Do you have a favorite?
Well, I think it depends on the site. On ours, the horizontal nav fits really well. But at one point, a previous Mid-Michigan College site, the navs were on the left. So it really kind of depends on how much space you have, and then also how that's going to translate to different screen sizes, and there's just a lot of things to consider.
And sometimes you don't even have to choose. There are parts of our website where there's that horizontal nav, and then
Yeah, right.
suddenly on the left-hand side you see a side nav appear.
Yeah, yeah,
So you can mix and match.
yeah.
Okay, the other thing that we need to talk about today, Anthony, is the midterm journal, the midterm planning journal that is assigned this week. Believe it or not, we're coming up on the midterm project. We're in week 7, and we wanted to get you thinking about what you're going to be doing for your midterm. Think back a couple chapters ago to when we introduced CSS. Our author mentioned this website that is kind of dormant now, but it was a place where web designers shared multiple designs of the same web page. It was the CSS Zen Garden. And I remember when this was new, I had always wanted to submit my own design. I never did, and now they're no longer accepting submissions. But my dream lives on in the midterm project because for your midterm, you will be designing your own version of the CSS Zen Garden. So let me show you the CSS Zen Garden if you haven't been here before. When you visit it, you might wonder what's up. It's this green, aqua green design. The text is about a CSS Zen Garden, but what does it even mean? Well, just look with your eyes, and then I'm going to click on one of the links that's on the left-hand side. I'm going to click on Steel, and we'll see is the entire page changes its design, but the content is all the same. The same text is on this page. Maybe there's animations. If I go back and I click on something besides Steel, let me click on screen filler. The text is technically all the same, but the design is entirely different. And the beauty of the CSS Garden was that if you inspected the code behind here, all the same HTML tags were there. There's only one tag that's different on the page, and that's actually what style sheet it's referencing. So if you look up in the URL, this is design 217. Somewhere in this HTML file it says to load the CSS file 217. And that's what causes this design to change. If I was looking at a Steel page that we had up a minute ago, that's design number 219, it looks like. So that loads that CSS file when you're on it. So you can browse around on the Zen Garden site. I also, in Moodle, made sure we link to a blog post that introduced the Zen Garden. This might be a better way for you to browse some of the designs because they show you little thumbnails of all the ones that are here. I know that I see that handcrafted design, and I also see a robot named Jimmy mentioned a lot because students really like these. What's cool about the robot named Jimmy design, number 215, is there's an animation, yes, but as you scroll down the page, parts of the design are actually using display fixed, and so the robot stays and all the content scrolls up on top of him, which is kind of cool. And that carries down through the site, and there's a little bit of a transparency with an RGB color that allows the robot to kind of peek through, which is pretty cool. Your midterm planning journal this week asks you to browse through the Zen Garden, find 2 designs that you like, and comment on why you like them, because you're going to be on the hook in a week or so to start building your own design. So knowing what you like is going to help you build your own. I also want you to take a look specifically at these designs for examples of the box model in action. So that's the borders, the margin, the padding, and even width and height. Try to see how that is used on these designs because you're going to need to learn how to do this yourself. So provide a few examples of the box model in action. And if you fire up the web inspector, you can inspect any element on the page and learn some other CSS properties that you haven't used yet. So I know that this robot has something cool with him. Let's open up the web inspector. Wait for my web inspector to open. Come on, Chrome. Let's see if I can find the robot with the web inspector. Is he on the body or is he on the section? He must be on the section here. Somewhere in here there's going to be a background that has the robot image. It might be a little bit deeper. Come on, robot. there's the image. Oh no, that was the rotating background, it looks like. Maybe I picked off a bit more than I can handle during the live stream. But the point is, if you poke around at enough of these elements, you're going to find CSS. Like I found this background property that when I unchecked it, that was the spinning image that kept moving around. But you're going to see other things like height and left and position fixed. Oh, yeah, position fixed. I wonder if I uncheck that, what happens? No, the robot still sticks. If you poke around far enough, you'll find the pieces of the element, pieces and elements of the page that are designed with CSS that you can learn. So these are the CSS properties that you can be able to use in your own design. And even more importantly, you can actually find CSS that you can reuse yourself. So you're not going to be allowed to change any of the HTML in Garden, but you're going to be able to actually write CSS selectors to style the elements on the page. If you look in the source code of the Zen Garden, there's a lot of classes and IDs on every single element in HTML file. And the creator of the Zen Garden did that on purpose. He wanted it to be really easy for anyone to come in and write either an ID selector with the pound sign or a class selector with the period to adjust a specific region of the web page. And that actually brings me back to the navbar challenge. When I share this code with you, this unordered list that I've styled, this might not be the best way to write the CSS because you have another unordered list later on in the page. Like, let me go ahead and add another one at the bottom here. Put an H2 and say my favorite colors. And if I put L and an LI in here with red, green, and blue, just for fun, you'll see that I think I inadvertently have styled that to no longer look like an unordered list. It's now just the words green blue, which isn't what I expected to see. I wanted the bullet points. So something that you might be able to do is actually put a class on the UL called, nav-list. And then what you could do is write a class selector, so ul.nav-list. And now this thing that gets rid of the bullet points will only affect the UL that has a class of nav-list. I'd have to fix the LIs as well, so I'd probably want to say find that nav-list and select the LIs underneath it to change them to inline block, and that fixes the rest of it. So what I've done here is I've written a class selector, and I've also written a descendant selector. Descendant selectors are just selectors combined together. So you could write a selector and then provide a space and then an element selector. And you're actually telling the browser that you want to cast a much more specific net. You don't want to grab all the ULs or all the LIs. You only want to grab the LIs that are underneath the UL that has a class of nav-list. So as you read the chapter this week and as you watch the lambda.com videos that we've provided in Moodle, you're going to learn a lot more about selectors. And those are going to allow you to, in turn, work on your midterm project to only select the parts of the page that you want to change the design of. I had a couple questions already about the midterm project when I provided the link to the Zen Garden, and they asked if they had to start from scratch. And I think that the person who was talking to me might have found a design that they liked and they wanted to start with this and tweak it. And I'd actually caught against starting with the design because if you look at the CSS for this web page, it's probably hundreds, not thousands of lines long. And that might be really hard for you to fully wrap your head around and change the way that you want. So I'd rather that you start with a blank CSS file and then start writing the selectors and the CSS properties to do what you want. As you saw with the navbar example, it only takes like 3 or 4 selectors to suddenly change the whole layout of the page. And I think one of my favorite designs in the Zen Garden is the screen filler one that has it uses the box model to great effect. It has padding and then borders, and then it has these transparent background colors that allow the boxes to stack on top of each other. You can do this with very little CSS, and you don't have to start with this one. You could actually do it yourself with a few properties. And I think we've talked about nearly all of them. We've talked about the RDBA colors that let you have transparency. We talked about the box model today. The only thing that this design probably does that we don't know yet is how to position specifically on the page, but that will be coming up in a chapter very soon. So I think you've given the Zen Garden assignment in your class in the past, Anthony. What do you think the Zen Garden allows students to do?
I agree that that it's going to be a lot better experience if they start from scratch, rather than trying to edit one. I usually get a mix, and I think that it causes some confusion when they start out with one that's already there and then try to pare it down rather than building up. So I think that's some pretty good advice that you gave. Um, but plan, have an idea of what you're going for rather than sitting down and starting to write code. Have an idea of what you want it to look like and how you want it to be organized before you even go near Atom.
And if you wanted to start with one and tweak it, like you can still use the web inspector to maybe start learning what these properties are, and you can actually see the selectors.
That's a great idea.
And you could maybe start doing tweaks inside the web inspector to say, well, if I was to use this selector and I wanted to look different, maybe I want this H1 background color to be, something that's dark blue instead. You can do all of that with the web inspector, and you can actually copy and paste from here the property name, even the selector, and then paste it into your Atom CSS file. So yeah, good advice. Are there any other questions in the chat room that came up, Anthony?
No, you answered them.
Okay.
I really like that last purple color you had with the over the aqua there. I like that.
All right. Well, we made it through a bunch of technical challenges. My computer's barely keeping up now. I think I'm gonna up the live stream now, and we'll post this recording. I will still have the recording from last semester too, which will hopefully be a quicker way to look at the navbar. So if you're watching this and something still seems confusing, check out the video from fall, and I think that will help as well. So good night, everybody. You want to say goodbye, Anthony?
That's all, folks.
Oh, I thought you were gonna do something from Pee Wee Herman.
I was referencing Porky Pig on that one, but I don't know if they're hearing the same thing I'm hearing. So,
okay.
But yeah, the secret word was I don't remember what it was.
All right. Good night, everyone.